context.
Hello everyone and welcome to week 2. In this video we'll be talking about the focus for this week's work as well as identifying some key questions to consider as we move forward. It is important to note that this video is intended to provide you with a context for the key elements of your work and not serve as your only resource that you're going to be using. The questions that will guide us today are: what is graphic design or visual design? What's the nature of a graphic designer? What is the relationship between graphic design, digital technology, and learning, which is essentially what are you trying to say and how are you trying to say it? And what is a design example, which we will look at providing an example for. The first question of what is graphic design or visual design is an important question that we will continue to explore throughout the course as we encounter different design problems that have visual design solutions. If you were to Google what is graphic design, you would find a wealth of information. You can see here we have 192 million results, which could just be a poor result of the way that we were searching. A lot of the information you find on the definition of graphic design is contradictory, and this is something that you can also find when you do a Google image search. So this is a visual representation of what you find when you search what is graphic design, which may or may not be more appealing to you. As with many things, there's no one answer to the question of what is graphic design. However, in its simplest form, graphic design has been defined as thinking made visual. This is a quote stated by Saul Bass, who is a graphic designer. And essentially what he was meaning here is that visual design is taking the process of thinking and making it available to other people through visual mediums. Visual design and graphic design use a variety of elements such as line, color, shape, texture, and form. It can also be found in a variety of mediums, including typography, illustration, photography, videography, and animation. It is guided by specific design principles which are also not equally agreed upon, but they are based on visual art, and they include things such as pattern, contrast, emphasis, balance, scale, and harmony. As noted, these elements are not set in stone, and disagreements exist within the visual design communities as to the importance, relevance, and existence of each of the above. One example of the disagreement that exists is whether or not audio is a component of visual design. Many designers feel that with the advancements of digital technologies, when audio is used in visual design work, it enhances the emotional appeal of the artifact. Other designers feel that as soon as you add audio, it ceases to become visual. Regardless of the perspective that is taken on the inclusion of audio in visual design, it's important to note that visual design isn't simply about being artistic, but rather it is guided by specific principles of visual mediums. This brings us to the next question of what is the nature of a graphic designer. When considering who a visual designer is, most people often think of somebody who's artistic. You might be thinking, well, I can't draw and I'm not really artistic, so therefore I can't do visual design. What I'd like to point out here is that this is a limiting belief that is also self-fulfilling. If you don't think you are artistic, then you won't be artistic. The reality is that we are a visual species. Our eyes are one of the primary senses that we use to interpret the world. They're so well developed that they actually physiologically and philosophically serve as the primary point of neurological stimulation and brain development. This is not to suggest that our other senses aren't important. In many cases they are more important, and we often seek ways to quiet our mind by closing our eyes. However, graphic and visual design are focused on using visual design elements for the purpose of communication. The content and nature of this information is subjective, but what is consistent is that information, at least in part, is processed through our visual senses. So the question of who a visual designer is really is about whether or not you can create something that a person can experience visually that can help to communicate. And so for the purpose of this course, a visual designer is anyone who can do that. This brings us to our next question, which is what is the relationship between graphic design, digital technology, and learning? Essentially, the relationship between each of these elements boils down to what you are trying to communicate and how you are trying to communicate it. The common thread between design, digital technology, and learning is information. Information serves as the content for what you're talking about. Graphic design can serve as the content of the information. Digital technologies are used as a medium for creating, sharing, and collecting information. And learning is the experience by which an individual takes information, processes it, in order to develop knowledge. This is an intricate process that is ongoing. It's something that we experience every single day of our lives. What is important to note here is that all information, whether visual, textual, auditory, or visual, we said visual twice, that's how important it is, all different pieces of information have elements of design. As a result, design plays an important role in the nature and structure of information that we use to learn. Now, this course will go beyond the common conception that graphic design is all about making things look good. Okay? This is something that I really want to emphasize. This is not the only purpose of visual and graphic design. We're going to explore the ways in which various mediums can be used to communicate information that is valuable to the learner. Once we've done this, we can establish what the purpose of design is. Now, for this class, we have to look at what a design problem is. For the purpose of this course, a design problem will be any problem that relates to the communication of information that may have a visual solution. What these problems will be very diverse and dependent on the individual experiences that you seek, but the visual solution is the key component which makes something a design problem. At its core, the idea that we need to get people to understand, or at the very least experience, a piece of information. This seems relatively simple. However, there are often barriers to the goal of communicating information, such as time, space, tools, and the characteristics of the audience, which can include age, gender, and culture. And so, a designer uses the principles and elements of design to overcome these barriers and to achieve their design goal. As you will see in the design cycle video, this is a complex process that involves planning, the use of existing knowledge and resources, the development of new knowledge and resources, all of which help in the communication of information. In this class, you'll engage in the process of using visual design principles and elements to create artifacts that communicate. Some key questions that I'd like you to think about as you move forward in this process are: what are the principles and elements of graphic design? We've talked really briefly about some of them, but this is not enough. You need to go further. What is balance? What is harmony? How is symmetry created? It's important to note here that while you can go to Wikipedia or one of the thousands of other internet sources that talk about graphic design to read about these principles, they are best understood when applied in different contexts. You may not need to know everything about radial balance in your work if you're not using it for the purpose of communicating the information that you're trying to communicate. You will need to distinguish between the principles that are relevant to what you are doing and the principles that are not. Make note, though, you will be held accountable to explaining what the principles are that you're using in your design artifacts, and you will be asked to defend them. So it's important to take some time to become experienced with these terms. The second question that I'd like you to take into consideration is: what are the characteristics of different mediums that are valuable in supporting design goals? As noted, visual design involves the use of multiple mediums to support the communication of information. Each medium has distinct characteristics that make it appropriate for specific design challenges. Not all mediums are appropriate for design problems, so you'll need to be able to identify which medium is appropriate and explore the characteristics that medium as it relates to your design problem. For example, if you choose to make a short video to explain something, the question will be why. What advantages does the medium of video provide you that other mediums, such as illustration or typography, may not? The third question that I'd like you to think about is: how does bad design impact the communication of information? As noted in the beginning of the course, visual design is often trial and error and ends up being mostly error. The key thing to consider here is that when design is bad, its greatest flaw is that it interferes with communication. One of the greatest sources of learning that you will have is the mistake that you will make, which is why critique and feedback play such an important role in this course. You're encouraged to try different things and to make mistakes. However, it's important for us to recognize how bad design can impact the communication of information. I would encourage that you explore examples of poor design. Google ugly PowerPoint and see what you get. Now, you're going to have different things and different interpretations of what the word ugly means, but for the purpose of this course, what I'd like you to think about is ugly design is design that blocks you from your intended goal. The last question that I'd like you to think about for this week as we move forward is, what is hypermedia and how is it used in design? This may be a new term for you, and it's something that you're going to need to look up. So the idea here is, as you will see in your design and the course materials, visual design is not about just using images. It includes other forms of media and using those forms of media in conjunction. So what I'm trying to say is that, and quite poorly, what I'm trying to say is that it's when you use different types of media at the same time. So you use videos, images, and audio all within the same artifact to create an experience. This is becoming a much more common way to develop designs, and is something that you should become familiar with as you move forward in your work. If you have any questions regarding this video, please feel free to email me at the email on the screen, or post your question to the Edmodo community, or bring it up with in tutorials with your facilitators.
Thanks for watching the Week 2 Context.